have ever wondered what it truly feels like to build a startup? The restless nights, the small victories, the heavy weight of decisions. Today's guest has lived it all, listeners. Welcome back to BizBlend. I'm your host, Sana, and today's conversation it isn't about just the blueprints or pitch decks. It's about the human side of entrepreneurship. Now, talking about my guest, he has built two startups from the ground up, invested in over 70 others, and mentored hundreds of founders who have sat across the table with equal parts ambition and fear. And what makes his story unique isn't just the experience, but how he chose to capture it. Instead of writing another step by step manual, he wrote The Entrepreneur's Odyssey, a business novel that blends the grit of the lean startup with the soul of the alchemist. It's less about instructions and more about immersion, about walking in a founder's shoes and feeling the tension between hope and heartbreak. So, today we are going beyond theory and into lived truth. Let's dive into the real journey of entrepreneurship, equal parts chaos and clarity, with our incredible guest, Andrew Ackerman. So, Andrew, welcome to the show. And as always, it is such an honor to have you here with us.
Damn, that was a great intro. I think I'm going to rip off some of that and use it myself.
Oh my God, that's flattering. That's flattering. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your kind words. And let's first begin with your journey of building your first startups. So I mean, what exactly, what moment or any epiphany or any experience made you think that this startup or this business model is going to work, and what moment nearly convinced you to walk away?
So, um, if I'm brutally honest with myself, and I try to be, there was a lot of luck involved with my first startup. I made a ton of mistakes, and the um, the best thing I can say about it is that none of my mistakes killed the company. So I'll give you an example. You know, my I graduated business school in like 1995. I know it seems a long, long time ago. And when I
Mm,
graduated, the whole startup culture and even what VC wasn't very well known. So,
mm,
I had two choices basically, investment banking or consulting, and I chose consulting. But then just a few years later, this whole internet popped open, and I'm
yeah.
like, that's what I wanted to do with my life. And by complete chance, the brother of one of my friends from business school was starting a company that became Funk One, and they were looking
Uh,
for a third co-founder, and I kind of lucked into it.
mm, wow. So I think, yeah, I mean, luck is there. Excuse me. But you know what, Andrew? Sometimes, I mean, I'll be very blunt. Sometimes we do have the opportunities around us. We see them, but I don't know, we kind of push back ourselves to take those risks. So I kind of believe that yes, it's luck, but then also you definitely decided to take a risk as well, because being a co-founder, that too in the dot-com boom, and a very, very young company, it is not a joke.
Sure. So two things that you brought up that are really interesting. I wish I could remember who said this, but I firmly believe that luck is the end result of preparation. We all get an equal amount of lucky breaks, but the people who are constantly thinking about what they want to do and how these different opportunities can help them, they're laser focused on their startup or their career. When those lucky breaks come along, they're in a position to take advantage of them. And the people who are not thinking about it all the time and not purposeful about it, they get this lucky break and like, damn, not the right time for me to do that. Or I wish I could invest in that startup, but I'm just not liquid right now. That's not bad luck. That's good luck, bad preparation. So, that's one of the mindsets that I've come to adopt. And I think it's true.
Definitely. Definitely, Andrew. Um, Now, a more of a kind of, uh, general question, but definitely from all the lived experiences that you have had as a founder as well as an investor. Um, it's mostly around uh, the pressure cooker of entrepreneurship. I mean,
Mhm.
you might have experienced, would have seen founders break under pressure as much as you have seen them thrive. So, what do you think is the most misunderstood pressure of being a startup founder?
How lonely it is. It really is. It's a little isolating in a lot of ways because people think, oh, you're doing this startup, how glamorous it is, how cool it is, you're your own boss, blah, 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 blah. But really, there's a lot of staring at a computer screen all by yourself or with your co-founder. There's a lot of emails that people don't respond to because they just have no idea who you are. There's a lot of rejection involved in it. And unless someone has gone through that themselves, it's very hard to really get a feel for what that's like. It's very hard. So really, the only people who get what you're doing are people who have done it themselves.
That is so right. That is so right, Andrew. The good thing that you have been on both the ends. So, I mean, I so much agree with you because, um, I mean, um, there was a time when, in India as well, there has been a boom of people, kind of shunning the 9 to 5 corporate jobs and
Mhm.
then becoming founder startups. And I don't know, I mean, it's a very strange observation, but sometimes I do really see a lot of case studies where startups they collapse within the first 5 years of their operation or reception. um, and sometimes, it's I think those experiences are really, really required because apart from the failure side, they do teach a lot about um, why do I need this strategy? What exactly didn't work? What were the problems? And what do I need to learn or have the most important takeaway so that the same thing doesn't happen with my next venture? And sometimes even founders, they don't even venture any further to have a startup. So I think it's quite a messy, it's quite an isolating journey. But then,
Yeah.
uh-huh, go ahead.
Now, I was going to say, like, that's also one of the reasons founders are very leery of investing in solo founders. Um, we don't actually put it in the terms of like it's lonely, it's hard for you to keep going. Though, if you ever asked an investor point blank, they would probably say, "Oh yeah, there's a lot of that." But the other piece of it is um, there's two pieces to it actually. On the one hand, if you don't have somebody else who is your peer, they don't have to have 49% of the company or 51% of the company. But if you don't have
Mhm,
somebody else who is also a meaningful owner in the company that is your equal in decision making, that you have to say out loud to them and justify, I think we should do this because you actually haven't play tested that out loud. It sounds great in your head, but until you actually have to put it in front of someone else and they push back and they challenge you in a good way, uh, you're not really making the best decisions. Having a second person at the table, in addition to the moral support, it also makes your decisions better. And
okay.
lastly, there's a little bit of an inference about the type of founder you are if you resist having a co-founder. It's almost like this is a person that's probably not open to coaching. They don't, they're very focused on, I want to own 100% of it. I want to make all the decisions. I don't want to give up any control. That's kind of not the person we want to back. And I talk about this in the opening chapters of my book, where the um, the investor in the book, he kind of really loves the idea that the founder is brought to the table. He likes the founder, and then when the founder, says that it's just him, there's kind of an
Mhm,
awkward pause, and it's like not ideal. And there's a good chunk. There's two other chapters later in the book about potential co-founders and why one's not a fit and the other is. But it's really important, right? If you have an idea and you're thinking about going out there, I would say the number one thing you have to do is find a co-founder who complements you skills-wise and get them to come on board. It's kind of your first sale, and it's very important.
Oh, I absolutely second that. Absolutely second that. I think um, it really helps the founder in course correction, instead of having their own echo chamber, the people like yes men around them. Um,
Or no men to say no, right?
yeah.
In my first startup, I was an ex-consultant, so we had all these prices that the salespeople were putting out, and like when it was $9 per person, then it was $8.99 per person, or $8.95 per person. I'm like, guys, this is ridiculous to have a zillion different prices. Like we need to standardize. And I got to be a little bit of a dick about it until the CEO, my co-founder, pulled me aside. It's like, you don't understand, right? At this point in the company's existence, we just have to say yes. We can clean all this up later. But right now we have to say yes, take the contract no matter what it takes. And he was totally right. And if I did not have a co-founder there who could take me into the room and like firmly but respectfully kind of turn my head on straight, I would have spent all my time, or a chunk of my time doing stuff that would have hurt the company because there was no one there to give me the other perspective.
Mm, and uh, is it common with all the startups, Andrew, that there's a kind of pressure of rapidly growing, rapidly scaling, or justifying the ROI? I mean, I've seen a lot many, as I was mentioning before, case studies where, and just for the sake of rapid expansion or rapid growth, um, I mean, they just collapsed. I mean, we have seen so many examples out there. Do you think this is very common, or this is something natural, or it can be avoided?
So the pressure for rapid growth is around a certain type of startup. So let's be kind of clear what we're talking about. VC-backable tech startups are what we're
Mm,
talking about here. So if you have a more traditional small business startup, you're opening up a restaurant or you're opening up a consultancy, you can grow at different paces and you can grow out of revenue. I mean, if you're opening a car wash, you can get a traditional business loan. That's totally fine. And then you can grow at your own pace and you can make a lot of money that way,
mm,
potentially. Uh,
mm,
but that's not what really we're talking about. When we say startup, that's kind of a shorthand for VC backable tech startups. And for that kind of startup, you can't get money from the bank because you're coming up with something that's totally new to the world. They don't know how to underwrite that. And you
exactly.
often can't grow out of revenue because you're not going to have revenue for a good year or two or more.
Mm,
So
mm,
for those kinds of startups, the least worst alternative they have left is VC money. Now, if you're looking for VC money, a venture capital firm, we have these kind of time constraints around our investment. So we're making very risky investments. And to justify to our investors that they should invest with us, we have to go for much higher ROIs, rates of return on investments, than say somebody who's investing in a relatively low risk business like a dry cleaner. So in order to justify or to get to those rates of return, the
mhm,
startup has to grow at a certain pace and has to have the potential to be $1 billion plus business.
mm.
And you don't get there without rapid growth, and you don't get there without a massive potential market size. So
Yeah.
if you're that kind of tech startup and you want to raise VC money, you have to be prepared. You have to be that kind of upside, and you have to be prepared for that kind of pressure and that kind of ability to scale. That's just the nature of the business for this type of startup.
Mm, definitely, definitely, yeah. Now, I would like to shift a bit into the more emotional part of being a founder. I mean, it's a bit of a personal question, Andrew. What did being a founder cost you personally? Like relationships, health, or peace of mind?
So my first time around, it cost me more money than anything else to start with. There was a period of time where we were utterly without salary. but that was when, I was single or, newly married. I think I just had, at one point, I had my first kid during that first startup. When the babies are young, they're not that expensive. So it was
Mhm.
actually, I didn't, other than stress, and in particular stress about, when am I going to exit this thing? What's the end game for this? I didn't really suffer that much, to be clear. The second time around, there was founder drama that ultimately doomed the startup. We ended up actually in lawsuits. There was, quite a bit of stress and hard feelings about that. And for a while there, I had to do all this, and I couldn't comment on it publicly because, we were still in litigation. So
Mhm.
it was it was a very isolating time, and very few people I could talk to outside of, my wife and a couple of trusted advisors. That was a pretty stressful time, but fortunately, it wasn't a very long period in time.
Hmm. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that openly, Andrew. And do you feel, um, do you believe that as a founder, it's kind of a prerequisite capability to be emotionally strong, to kind of, accept the setbacks, the pressure, the isolation? I mean, is that kind of a, you know, yeah, exactly, prerequisite skill that every founder should have or a potential founder should have?
Well, the isolation you should deal with by having a good co-founder and surrounding yourself with other entrepreneurs who have been through it. You can mitigate that. The thing that you absolutely have to have is resilience, right? You can't be afraid of being told no. You can't
Yeah.
take that personally. If you
So,
do, and I mean, it's okay to be disappointed, but if it sets you back and it ruins your day every time someone says no, not the field for you. And that
mhm.
actually goes to part of the reason why I wrote the book as a novel rather than a how-to guide.
Yeah.
I wanted people to really understand what it feels like, not just what it takes to get done, but what it feels like to be an entrepreneur. And, it's not like the Steve Jobs biopic. It's not like the Facebook movie. It's a much different day-to-day experience. So by writing it
Yeah.
as a novel, the people who are, sitting in an office somewhere or a cubicle struggling with this pain point that they think they have a really great solution for and trying to decide, like, is leaving my day job and starting a startup to solve this, is that for me? By reading the book, they can get a feel for whether or not temperamentally that's the right path for them.
Totally. Totally. And I really love that, kind of a um, shift, a kind of a refreshing way, because most people they write business books as guides, but you wrote yours as a novel, and then it's basically not telling people what to do, but letting them actually feel the ride. And then sometimes I believe feeling the story, it makes it stick more deeply than, just a checklist or just, how to do or simple guides.
Well, I wish I could claim that it was an original idea, but actually, that's partly the reason that every religion known to man is stories, right? They
Mhm.
tell no, in theory, you should start a religion like, okay, let's cut to the chase. Here are the 20 things you can't do and the 10 things you have to do. But none of the religions take that approach. They're all stories about founders, in this case of the religion, ancestors, creation myths. But, and while there are do's and don'ts, they're often embedded in that concept. And that makes them more memorable, more relatable. And then when you go forward a little bit, just to really jump into like a totally different example, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote many books. The first couple of books were all philosophical books. They were written like philosophy books. And at one point, he's like, you know what? Here's my problem, right? I'm fighting against myths. Like there's assumptions about how people live their lives that are so deeply embedded in our subconscious that just talking about, different philosophies doesn't get through. So when he wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra, his seventh book, he wrote it
Huh.
like like a Bible. He wrote it as the story of this prophet. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to start writing my own myths. And I'm going to have these myths, you know, connect with people at such a deep level that it actually gets them to challenge those assumptions they didn't even know they had. So the idea of using stories to get ideas across, I wish I could claim it was my own, but it's, several thousand years older. Uh, and it's just a really powerful device.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And I really, really appreciate that, you did claim that you said it's an original idea. It has never happened before. It has happened, but definitely for the business world, it's quite rare. Um, but I think now more and more, because now people are also becoming individually active in sharing their experiences and sharing
Mhm.
their insights from those lived experiences. Definitely storytelling is something that is definitely a very effective kind of hook strategy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, we mentioned this in the you mentioned this in the intro. I spent a good chunk of my life running accelerator programs. So dealing with founders who are kind of in that gray area between they've already worked on the idea to develop it and they've already got maybe product ready to go, but still in the session where there's a lot of work left to be done on how they want to, finish the product, how they want to go to market. And I found that the advice that stuck best were stories about other similar startups and how they handled those situations. So, and I don't think that's also not necessarily super original. A lot of people will use that as a way to get their point across. To the extent I'm doing anything original is rather than, a series of unconnected anecdotes, I've tried to tell the entire story through a same connected narrative about a fictional startup going soup to
Mm.
nuts. So it's all about that same founder, that same angel investor, and the challenges they're working through together.
Brilliant, brilliant. And talking about your stint with investment, I mean, you have invested in 70 plus startups.
Hmm.
um uh, do you see any common patterns throughout them, that consistently separate the ones who secure funding than, the ones that don't?
That's a very good question. The startup world is all like, yes, this is what matters. And then, oh, but there are exceptions, right? Or it depends. So I won't say 100%, but I will say, and this is not going to be particularly insightful, but the founders who have had prior startup experience, ideally an exit. If not an exit, they founded something, they learned a lot. And if not, they founded something, they were a relatively early employee at a startup. They do better. And they do better because they know what they're getting into, right? If
Yeah.
startup life's not for them, they've self-selected out. They don't do a second startup. They've seen a lot of the mistakes and they're determined not to make them again. So they tend to perform better overall for me.
Yeah, that's obviously, I think that's kind of yeah. And I think it's also fascinating because we often hear more about, okay, these are the new unicorns, these are the startups that have secured huge funding from so and so VCs or so and so corporate funding, and these rounds of funding. But you have sat with the 95% who also don't make the headlines. So I think your perspective, it can really demystify success and failure.
So also those guys like the opening eyes of the world, they started out with three people in a room or four people in a room also. Like these overnight successes, they took 8 years to get there.
True. Yeah.
So, it's not like they're different. It's just that that's what people read about and it seems so glamorous, but it doesn't really reflect the realities of what it takes to go from 0 to 1.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so right, Andrew. So right. And then often I think those, you know, 8 years, or sometimes we see many startups working in the stealth mode. That kind of goes unseen, or maybe doesn't get highlighted in the news or in the media. But I think that's
Or
that.
even if they're not in stealth mode, right? They're just not newsworthy when they're, hey, we got our first $2 million in sales. Like, that's awesome to the investor. It's not something that TechCrunch is going to write up.
Right. Superb, superb. So, Andrew, obviously for our listeners, especially all the entrepreneurs and the potential founders and the business owners, they would like to get a hold of your book, the novel, The Entrepreneur's Odyssey, and connect with you as well. What would be the best way?
Certainly. So it's available on Amazon, like everything else in the world. Entrepreneur's Odyssey. My last name is Ackerman. You should be able to find it right away. If you want a little bit more about me, my personal website is Andrew, the letter B as in boy, Ackerman.com. Tell you a little bit more about me. If you're teaching entrepreneurship, for example, I teach an entrepreneurship course. You can hear about or read about how I teach it, and maybe the Entrepreneur's Odyssey is a good companion textbook for your course. So check out the website, and if you want to reach out to me, there's contact info on that site, or you can just follow me on my socials, whatever you're comfortable with.
Super, super. Well, make sure to have all the details in the show notes. And Andrew, this is such a candid conversation, because I think it's more about honesty, not just about strategy. And entrepreneurship isn't just about the spreadsheets or the valuations. I think it's about the late night doubts, the weight of decisions, and that courage to keep going even when everything is, like working against you or conspiring to work against you. So thank you so much for bringing the human side of entrepreneurship, and of course the human side of investing as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, listeners, and you reminded us that startups aren't built by formulas alone, they're built by humans. Messy, brilliant, stubborn, hopeful humans. And that's why The Entrepreneur's Odyssey isn't just a book, it is a mirror for anyone who has ever thought about taking this leap. So, if this episode resonated with you, share it with a founder friend who might need to hear it today. And remember that building a business isn't about playing the hero or the heroine, it's about staying human. Until next time, I'm Sana, and this has been BizBlend. Thank you.